Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of Busting Life Challenges with me, Diane Parker. And today I have a very special guest on my podcast, and that's Superintendent Stephen Maddocks from the IOM Police Force. And he is in charge of suicide prevention here on the Isle of Man. Thank you so much for doing this today.
You're quite welcome.
So can you explain, please, what actually is your role as the Superintendent of Suicide Prevention?
Yeah. So I'm the superintendent for all the operational side of policing, which deals with everything from going to a road traffic collision right the way through to investigating serious crime, all the community teams around the island, roads policing, all the plethora of things that the police have to deal with on a daily basis. I'm part of the role I'm in. I'm part of a group which is called the Suspected Suicide Rapid Response Group, which is a public health led initiative. I'm not overseeing that. I'm just part of the group that runs and looks at the suspected suicides. And what that group does, it's any investigation into a sudden death has to go through the coronial process. So the coroner of inquests has to ultimately find out when the person died, where they died, how they died, and that legal process. And it's only the coroner of inquest that can determine the cause of someone's death. What we recognise with some of the figures that we saw, and we suspect something might be a suicide. Public health work closely with obviously the police and other partners involved, and they approached the coroner of inquests to inform the coroner of the work they wanted to try to do to try and identify perhaps people who might be affected badly by a suspected suicide. It's not a play on words per se, but it's just making sure we're clear as to how we go about things. But the coroner was satisfied as long as the coronial process isn't interfered with, which it isn't. Is that we can look at trying to identify people who are left behind and bereaved, if you like, by a suspected suicide, and doing it sort of straight away as opposed to the end of an inquest. It really is more of a welfare thing for people who are left behind. So suicide, well, any death is impacting on people's lives. It's very sad.
For sure.
But when someone apparently takes their own life, but that adds an extra level of complexity. So from the police side, I lead on that for the police side, and I work with the people within public health who coordinate it all.
Right, that's a lot.
Yeah. I mean, I just wanted to give a little bit of context really as to what it was and about the group. It's not a police-led group; it's public health. Public health recognised the issues that suicide and the impact on people's lives that suicide can have, and obviously we act as the coroner's officers, so we're involved in that process, and it's basically trying to identify people who might be affected by somebody's suicide. And it doesn't need to be necessarily immediate family members.
No,
it could be close friends. It could be part of organisations if they're part of a club. And it's trying to recognise and try and identify people so they can get some sort of intervention and help at an early stage. Right,
that's good.
Yeah.
So is that where the prevention comes in? Because obviously suicide prevention, as the words imply to me, that it's to help people before they get to the point of suicide.
Yeah, it's so there's public health again, that they're looking at things like suicide prevention. This group, in some ways, it identifies people after somebody's suspected of taking their own life. So the question then is, well, what's been done to try and stop that person? That there is work going on with that, and to try and to stop this, trying to stop that. But this is in the aftermath of somebody taking their own life. so there's this, it's like two strands of work, if you like, being done, and this is one of the strands that I'm sitting on, because the suicide prevention in itself per se is a bigger piece of work that public health are looking at.
Right.
So and it gets down to I suppose the pressures of modern life and the stresses and strains people are under.
For sure.
And part of that, and I mean, I heard it on the radio just before, St John's Ambulance now are doing mental health interventions, and the world now seems to be a far more complicated place than it perhaps once was. People are talking about mental health issues more openly, which is a good thing.
Very good thing.
But with that then comes, okay, well, people are talking about it now, like you would go and do a first aid course if someone got a burn or they got a cut finger. Some people would, it's part of everyday working, isn't it? First aid. Well, the mental health first aid and trying to nip things in the bud, or trying to help people work through things at an earlier stage, so they don't become really, in a dark place where they can even consider hurting themselves or harming themselves. Yeah,
it's really all good stuff. I mean, it really is to open up the conversations around grief, and the aspects of grief. And most people don't appreciate that grief is an emotion that we all do in regard to any loss that we experience. Where you've had an end of a familiar pattern of behaviour, that's a loss. And the emotion is grieving. And it's just how attached you are to that loss as to how much you will grieve. So if we could talk more about grief and be more open and understanding of that, there would be less need for everybody to bottle it in and think they have to be stiff upper lipped about it. Or at the funeral, indeed, we both went to last week. I don't know if you caught when the bishop or whatever he was talked to the widow directly and said, time as a healer. She's in a traumatic state. She hasn't quite finished processing what's happened to her. And now that extra pressure is time's a healer. What happens if a few years down the line she doesn't feel like that? And that's what happens. You start to feel and think, well, they're doing okay. What's wrong with me?
Well, that comes down to everyone's individual.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
But
and where they are in the relationship to the person that they've lost.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's. I mean, it's. We'll all have grief throughout our life.
We will.
And some people will experience at an early age, even a young age, if a relative dies, or a grandparent, or even another sibling or something.
Well, it can start with a hamster.
Yeah, of course,
Pet hamster.
And there's somebody within that I work with has recently lost their pet, and they never thought the loss of the pet was going to have such an impact on them and their family. But like you say, it's a routine.
It's the relationship that you have with that animal. And for a child to go through that experience, it's a great opportunity for a parent to sit down and say, how are you feeling? Tell me about your friend. But what generally tends to happen is, stop crying, I'll get you another one at the weekend. It's just a hamster without taking into account the feelings, and those things start patterns. But we're not here to talk about that today. But so what's the way forward then for building on the mental health side of things, and what you're going to be doing for that?
So I suppose there's two strands really. We deal with mental health crisis on a daily basis. Our calls for service for mental health, and we work with the mental health team and work with Manx Care as well in their role. But it's been able to firstly identify it and deal with it appropriately, because sometimes, and quite often, whilst the police have we will respond quickly to something, we're not always the best people to turn up to deal with something. So a police van turning up and dealing with somebody in a mental health crisis, and certainly if they have to go to hospital, we want to bring them there if we have to bring them there in an ambulance, not the back of a police van. So we've all got to try and work to make sure we can deal with that firsthand and do it properly and do it in the right way and the caring way that it needs to be done, because it's really quite a delicate process. And then with the people who we can identify as being particularly vulnerable, it's making sure they get the right provisions and the right service to try and stop them ultimately, either harm themselves through the misuse of drink or drugs, to actually the next step of that, harming themselves physically or more physically, if you know what I mean, by harming themselves by taking their own life.
Yeah. I mean, generally from my own experience of clients and my work over the years, those sort of things are people not being able to express themselves. They can't find the words.
Yeah.
And so to make themselves feel better or to get it out of them, that's the sort of thing that they'll do. So I think, is there any element that you're putting into what you're thinking about of just having a forum of people that could get coaching?
Yeah, so one of the strands for the Suspected Suicide Rapid Response Group, the SSRR, we sort of refer to it as, one of the strands from that, and public health are looking at this at the moment, about how they can best deliver the service. Yes, we'll give literature out to people, and we'll give people some of the CRU's bereavement advice and literature is really helpful, and they've got different strands, and one of them's bereavement by suicide. But what we wanted it to be a little bit more personal, a little bit more proactive, as opposed to giving a leaflet and somebody might just put it on in a drawer, or they might even put it in the bin. It was having someone to proactively go and see them and speak to them, because they can then identify through as we're doing talking, identifying who might be vulnerable here. And you think immediately it might be immediate family, or a husband, or a wife, mother, father, but actually, it might be the person's best friend, who might have had some mental health issues previously, or suffered from some sort of a loss before, which makes them really vulnerable. So that's the way we wanted to try and that's the way we want it to move forward, to being more proactive and a little bit more personal, and sort of caring, I suppose, for the people involved.
I think that's excellent.
But you need the right people to do that. And for example, sometimes whilst at the initial throes of this, the police will be there, and we'll obviously make sure people are okay there and then. But then we've got the role of investigating the circumstances of the death for the coroner, and the police. Some people don't want the police around the house, and the police aren't the best people equipped to do that. So it is a bit of a team effort, but it's knowing where your role is, and how we all talk to each other, and then who will then support someone in a more sustained and professional way than perhaps might be the case now.
That's sort of one of the things that I do in the program with people, is get them to look at all their losses in life. Because people don't identify some of the things that, like I said earlier, that they've experienced in life that are actually a loss, and that they're grieving for it. They were just thought they were having funny emotions, and they didn't know what to do with them, couldn't give a name to them. And typically a friend of mine, having had a divorce, was the same. She said, I just don't know how to process this. I went, well, you're grieving. And that connection had not been made.
And it's understanding that and putting it in those terms, isn't it? And it's like adverse childhood experiences, the ACEs. We all have, when we've been growing up, we'll all have something along the way. Either your parents split up, or somebody dies, and there's the whole host of adverse childhood experiences, and they say 2 or 3 usually, children, but you start adding more of those sort of things to a child, it can have a huge impact later on in life.
It certainly can indeed.
I remember when and sometimes I suppose your profession can have a part to play in it. So my dad died in 2018. And when I was up in A&E, the doctor who I knew, and I know him quite well, and he's a friend of mine really, because I know him through work. He came in, and we had our family there, and he said, "Look, sorry, we've done everything we can, and it was, it was as you'd imagine, it was an upsetting time. But I went straight into police mode.
Yeah.
Straight into police mode.
Defense mode. I know what to do here.
Well, and it was right. And I need to go and see my auntie and my cousin.
Yeah.
I've got my sisters across, right, and I ended up went into that kind of that mode. So, and you suppose you do put it in the back of your mind sometimes.
Well, I don't know. Sometimes because it would still be a shock.
Yeah, it was.
And then so the brain puts down the dopamine. So that's why we feel a bit spongy sometimes, and like everybody else is in a different space and time to us.
Yeah.
And I think then that helps us just sort of glide through those tasks that we have to do. And it's only maybe a few weeks down the line that you start to actually realise and let things sink in and process what's happened.
Yeah, and that if you put that back to what we're talking about suspected suicide support, you've got all the issues with grieving, but then all the questions as to why might somebody have done this, and then all the, is it something I've done, not done, could have done, it's really quite
well, in the program I do with people, it's the word guilt, which an awful lot of people feel when they've had somebody have committed suicide. I should have done more, or this, that, and the other. Means to imply harm. So unless they have actually done the harm to somebody, in which case you should be there, it takes away that pressure a little bit to realise, well, that's the true meaning of the word guilt.
Yeah,
it's just been taken, like most words in the English language, and adapted in a different way.
Yeah.
So guilty, there is no reason to feel guilty if you understand the true meaning of the word guilt.
Yeah. Yeah.
To imply harm.
Yeah.
Did you actually do that?
Yeah.
No, I didn't.
Yeah. Yeah.
And work around those things.
Yeah.
I mean, some of the notes here, like the verb, depression, anxiety, loss of interest, humiliation. These are things that I know are elements of unresolved grief.
Yeah.
And then this is from the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention.
Right.
But they're identifying there.
Yeah.
If we could get in and help people through and talk through these aspects of things before it would even get to where you have to have that call to say somebody's done something.
Yeah, and that thing you just said there, it's the understanding of it. So the thing of guilt, I'd never thought of it like that.
Yeah.
I mean myself, and this is where the thing of mental health first aid, getting in early, recognizing it, and sometimes it doesn't. And I think sometimes people, when we're talking about it more, but I think people will think that they can't. Well, I'm not a mental health professional. You don't need to be a mental health professional to say to someone, "Are you okay?" You don't seem yourself today, and that can start a conversation. And sometimes even little things like that can make a huge, big impact. And it's looking out. It's looking out for each other, isn't it? And making sure you don't seem yourself today. Are you okay?
Yeah, absolutely.
And we said before we started recording, particularly men. But when you look at the statistics, it's usually men, probably around about my age bracket, who are actually more likely to take their own lives. When you look at it, when you look at the statistics, and one of the reasons will be because they don't want to speak or talk about it.
Yeah. So what could we do to help men open up to these things?
I suppose that there's trying to take the stigma away from it.
Yeah.
But there's some you see now there's some high profile people within the sports world. So the boxer Tyson Fury, he's had a long documented. Frank Bruno was another one. I'm a bit of a boxing fan, but there are other people that you look at who are actually coming forward and speaking about it, openly speaking, saying how they felt, saying what was going through their mind, sometimes not being able to put your finger on what's making you feel like that. That's what some of the things that
these
you're
things
doing,
here
all
could be
those things
percolating,
absolutely.
And then the cat dies, and that's it. You floods, and you don't know why.
Yeah, and somebody explained it to me once, which it does make sense. We've all got a certain level in us, like you imagine it as a bottle, and some people's bottom, the capacity is really, but if it keeps filling it up, It only takes a little bit. If you're up near the brim, and something small could happen, but it just overflows what's in the bottle.
Yeah,
that's the best way it was explained to me, which sort of resonated with me, because I thought, no, it makes sense. And because you would sometimes wonder, why is that just put somebody over the edge?
Right.
And it's not that. It's yes, it has been that, but it's just they are so full.
And we take in and form an internal file for every experience you've had in life.
Yeah.
So where that file, if you can imagine, has just got so full.
Yeah.
And then you said, pass me the salt. And I was like, salt, I'll give you salt.
Yeah.
And you're like, I only asked for the salt. But there's been a whole series of things that, we've all had it in our marriage relationships. You said, I'll sit and hold that one. I'll sit and hold that one. And the next thing is, and things in life are the same. So if we can actually, do you know, dear, it really annoyed me when you left your shoes in the bathroom and I fell over them rather than wait for the next time.
But that is true.
Getting these conversations going.
But it's all about communication.
It is.
There'll be people watching this, if people watch this, especially me saying this, who will laugh out loud probably when I say, about it is about communication, about talking things through. And sometimes, and it might be saying, well, I don't really feel great today, but it might be something like that. But it's recognized everyone's different and does it in different ways. And to me, if everyone's more aware of it, just general awareness, which I think people are now. Certainly there was, I've seen them for the last 5 years.
Especially after what we've been through last year, I think a lot more people have been shocked, I think, by the amount of people that we lost here last year. 22 is an awful lot of people to start talking. It's kind of like, may it be their gift.
And, then you have the other bit as well. So we're all told to stay in.
Isolation is one of the key ones.
And now I know people who are finding it hard to get back out. And so it's life can be tough. It's tough for everybody, isn't it? It is tough.
And loneliness. The two things that people, when I talk to them, that they struggle with is loneliness. Is the biggest one. And then just because they feel that they're struggling in general in life. Which is, it's sad, and that's why I created a group on the island for people that were over 50, because that's like my bracket. And I've had people since, and I've just started one for the younger ones because they're saying the same thing. There's no way of going out the same as in my day to connect with people. And I think it's just been made more awareness of it because of this last year in particular.
Do you think like social media and access to things like Facebook, Twitter and TikTok and the means of communication, do you think that's had an impact on things, on people's well-being? And
yes and no, because out of this group, for example, I've got together, I know that we've got 450 odd members in it now, and it's been going since here last July.
Right.
That's all people on the Isle of Man that felt alone or just needed to reach out for friendships. We have a good handful of them, maybe about a good 40 of them that meet up in different parts. But there's still a lot of people that are sitting and watching and interacting. And only occasionally will they actually put something. So I think it's a case that some people use it as they feel they want to. Some people just like to watch the process and get to know, trust and like somebody before they actually venture out. We've now set it up so we can meet people in smaller groups, because the idea of walking into a room of 20 people that you don't know can be very overwhelming. So we're kind of trying to get together like 2 or so people to go and visit people, so that you're not, you haven't got that vulnerability aspect. You've got to protect yourself as well. But going and actually trying to get these people to come out. But it's like you say, they're still frightened to come out because of what's going on.
And it isn't. We probably won't see the true impact of everything that's gone on in the last 2 years. It'll be probably years to come before we see the true impact of what's gone on, because it has been an unprecedented time in people in a generation, isn't it? Well, more than a generation,
Yeah.
So no, but I think the awareness side of things, and also like professional people and voluntary groups like yourself, all of us working a little bit closer together about it all. And people like, public health are leading on this, but it's the recognition of, this we need to look at this, and we need to do something about it to try and stop it, because it's for someone to take their own life. I mean, it's
so sad.
It's terrible. It
so
really
sad.
is terrible. And then I always think as well, you've got people who have been diagnosed with, say, a terminal illness, who want to live, and then you get the other side, and I know people have certain opinions about people that might take their own life, but I'm not saying I share them, but I'm just saying it causes this sort of debate, doesn't it? And it can be really quite tricky about how you try and manage that. But
yeah, I mean, the best way forward always is that we're all individuals having our own experience of life. Either way, I mean, my husband was kind of like fighting for his life for a few years as well. About 20 odd more than I thought I was going to get. So I'm always grateful of that.
Yeah.
And he didn't really have a lot of patience for somebody, but if you've not walked in anybody's shoes, then how can you possibly even judge? It's just, if you've got yourself into a place, a rut, or into a situation that you feel that you just can't get out of, then that's when to reach out and please talk to somebody. There is a way out. You might feel overwhelmed right now. Let's have a conversation. Let's break it down for you into a bite-sized piece that you can take away and do something about yourself.
And it's, part of that awareness. It's also recognition for people who are out there who might be worried about someone. And again, I don't profess to be a suicide expert, and I know what the police side of things. I know from listening to other professionals how how it all sort of fits together. But knowing some of the signs as well of when you need to maybe keep an extra eye on someone. And one of the things that, and it's been highlighted through some of the work we've had, is people might say, God, they seem so much brighter. They seem so much brighter, and things, they seem in a happier place. And sometimes it's because they might have reconciled it in their head. They know what they're going to do.
So some of the verbal signs I've put down here, again from the American Foundation: I can't go anymore. I wish I was never born. I wish I were dead. That's kind of what teenagers would say sometimes, isn't it? I won't need this anymore. Parents won't have to worry about me anymore. Everyone would be better off if I was dead. Life sucks. Nobody cares if I live or die. The non-verbal signs: social withdrawal, persistent drop in mood, disinterest in maintaining personal hygiene and appearance, uncharacteristically reckless behavior, poor diet changes, and etc. So the risk ones, do you come across those ones, the ones that have actually tried to do this, and you're trying to get and intervene with them more? Some of sometimes the way in which they're living, the sort of appearance of the house as well, where it's just things have piled up. And that can then that's like a vicious cycle. That can then cause more anxiety, and people becoming a little bit disheveled and unkempt. These are all characteristic signs of the story leading up to, someone taking their own life. And the thing about it doesn't mean if somebody's going through this, they're all going. Oh no, my house was upside down last week. It was driving me nuts.
But it's that coupled with other things. So if you know that they've got a lot going on in their life, that the things don't seem to be going right in some ways, and then these added things that can all just lead up, and the big thing there is who you reach out to, and that can be a difficult thing as well. In fact, one of my friends, spoke to me about this very thing. He knows someone who he's worried about, and he's tried to get interventions, and this is the bit of some services will need the person to go to them to go and make it. So a third party referral, say nobody will just cold call them and say, oh, we had a call to say that you weren't feeling great. Well, that might be an added thing. I know it's going to be an extra thing, but there's voluntary groups that might be able to assist with things like that.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
You know, and getting in early. Again, another part of work that we're doing, part of a group doing local area coordination hubs. So they're basically hubs in all 4 points of the island, where the whole idea is to try and have early intervention, early support for people, so they don't get into a statutory service or they end up,
that
harming
would be,
themselves.
yeah, that's the key.
And that sometimes is the way to do it. And just not making that offer. And sometimes it's with people that's just knowing sometimes that you're not there on your own. There's loads of people on the island who want to help. All the third, so you couldn't really function without the third sector and some of the voluntary groups. But there's loads of people who want to help. It's in a nice, I mean that in a nice way. Yeah. It's a real sort of community thing where they want to help. And I suppose it's how you get that message over, so people don't think that they're receiving charity, for want of a better word, or people interfering in their lives, but just knowing there's somebody there that can maybe help them a little bit. And that's because we all need a bit of help every now and then, don't we?
I'm absolutely for that. I'm a coach. That's what I do with the grief coaching. But I've got a big team behind me that I'm involved with, and I can go to them anytime I want to get coaching.
Yeah.
And I've needed it a lot in this last year.
Yeah.
So to create a safe space for someone to come and just talk and open up without you getting involved with it, because it's about them and listening to them.
Yeah.
That is it's just great.
Yeah.
And then in my case, if somebody is looking for coaching, then after you've done that process of listening and gathering and all the rest of it, then you can gently help them make some suggestions that would be good for them. Because as I tell my clients, all the answers are inside of you.
Yeah.
I just help facilitate, get them out.
Yeah.
And where you want to go with them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not tell you what to do.
Yeah. No, that is it's a good point, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I think some people might come thinking you're going to have the magic.
Yeah.
Either a magic word or you're just going to make them better.
Sometimes it can be as simple as saying a word that makes a light bulb go off and make them realise, oh, yes.
Yeah.
I never thought of it like that.
Yeah.
And, like you did before with guilt.
Yeah. But again,
now you've got a different
it's back to the thing about communication.
It is, and having a conversation, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, look, I don't want to take any more of your time because I'm just so grateful
that
you did this for us today.
Time, really.
But thank you so much for your time today.
Yeah, no, thank you. Thanks.
And we'll speak with you again soon. Bye.